Hey guys, welcome to my garage. So today I will be preparing the Volvo for its technical inspection or MOT test or whatever it's called. I want to change the engine oil, I want to change the transmission fluid, and I also want to change the brake fluid and check the brakes whether they are working fine. It's quite a lot of work for one day, but I will try to do it anyway. Let's see how it goes.
So let's start by raising the car to be able to remove the undercover, which is held in with Torx bolts. Then the next step is to unscrew the filter cover. It has a 36mm socket, which I didn't have, but it should be possible to open it with the adjustable wrench. And even though I tried as hard as I could, it seemed I'm already hitting a roadblock.
Well, I didn't get far. I can't take off the filter. I don't have a 36mm socket. I was trying with this wrench and also a different wrench, and there's just no way. I just can't release it. Whoever told this before is a moron in my view, because you don't tighten the filters this much. Well, anyway, I'm glad I didn't release the oil first, because now I would be stuck here with the car. So I need to get a 36mm socket and we'll try and remove it with that. Hopefully I'm not gonna break the filter housing. And now let's do the brakes. Hope we'll have more luck with those.
The brake fluid reservoir is hidden underneath this small cover, which is quite simple to remove. However, the cap on the reservoir is again way too tight. I actually had to use pliers to open it. Now I'm using a syringe with small thin hose, which fits into a small hole in the reservoir to pull out all the old brake fluid. And the brake fluid actually seems to be really old. I'm using a Brembo DOT 5.1 fluid, which I then pour into this pressurized brake bleeder system. I've used this on my BMW and was really happy with how well it worked. I just pump it up to about 20 psi and then connect it to this adapter to the brake fluid reservoir. Nice thing about this is that it will automatically refill the reservoir. I'll start the brake bleeding at the rear right wheel, because it is the furthest away from the master cylinder. After removing the wheel, I clean up the brake disc and then attach this hose, which goes to a catch can, to the bleed nipple on the brake caliper. And then I simply open the bleed nipple. The fluid starts to come out, and here we can clearly see the difference between old and new fluid. Then I just close the bleed nipple and clean up the area with brake cleaner. I used the opportunity to swap to the summer wheels for the car. From that point on, it is the same procedure on all the remaining 3 wheels. Of course, make sure you check if you have enough fluid in the pressure bleeder and keep adding pressure as needed. Thankfully, everything seemed to work without any issues. As a last step, release the pressure from the brake bleeder and only then disconnect it from the reservoir. Finally, just check if there is correct level of fluid. So I went ahead and pumped the brakes, and I felt that the pedal was going a bit down at the end, and then I just looked around the wheels and I found that we have a leak on the rear left. So I took off the wheel and it was only coming from the bleed nipple, so I apparently didn't tighten it up enough. So then I cleaned up the wheel and tightened the bleed nipple, and thankfully this resolved the issue. Finally, I just had to torque all the wheel bolts.
Okay guys, so this went almost flawlessly. I had that little leak in the back, but I was able to tighten up that bleed nipple and it looks to be okay now. So let's have a look at this transmission fluid, if we'll be able to change that.
Because you can't drain all the oil from the transmission, it is recommended to do a flush fill, which means you fill in the transmission first time, run it for a while to mix the old oil which still remained in, and then drain the transmission again and refill it the second time. As a first step, it is recommended to release the fill plug on top of the transmission, which is hiding underneath the air filter box. The fill plug is a Torx 55, which again I was really struggling to remove. Finally, I was able to break it loose with the breaker bar. Now that we know that the fuel plug is loose, we can start to drain the transmission fluid. The drain plug has a small Torx 40 bolt inside, which is used to set the correct fluid level. That needs to come out first. However, mine was again extremely tight and I stripped the bolt. At this point I was tired of this because everything was stupidly torqued and nothing seemed to go as it should.
Okay guys, so it's actually a couple of weeks later now. As you noticed, I managed to strip the Torx bolt on the transmission, so I had to order a new bolt and it took about a week to arrive here. I also ordered a Torx removal set. I hope it will work, so we'll be able to remove that bolt. And then I also ordered a 36mm socket for that oil filter. So I hope now nothing stands in the way so we can finish this today.
Now the new bolt is clearly a Torx 40, but I tried multiple bits that I have, even a brand new one, and they all seemed to me a bit loose. I even bought a Torx Plus or Ripe set, which actually fit tighter to the bolt. But the pattern is different, so this definitely needs a Torx 40 bit. Anyway, let's see if we can remove this seized and stripped Torx bolt. I've added a penetrating oil first, and then I hammered in this Torx remover bit. The Torx remover did bite into the bolt quite a bit, however, this bolt being so tight, it just stripped and rounded off completely. I also bought a hex remover set, which kept stripping the bolt even more. As a last resort, I tried to cut a groove for a flathead screwdriver. I used a vice grip on a screwdriver to turn while pushing with my other hand, but I still couldn't loosen that bolt. Then I remembered that I have a 1/2 inch flathead bit, so I tried it with an impact driver.
It's loose.
Now this car had a transmission oil change about 30,000 kilometers ago, so the fluid doesn't look that bad to me. Yet again though, I was struggling to release the main drain plug with 17mm hex. Thankfully, the impact managed to do it. This single bolt was about 10 euros and still it didn't come with an O-ring. Fortunately, I had a matching one in my set. As a transmission fluid, I will use this Revenol TWS Lifetime, which is made for this type of transmission. This is a 4-liter bottle and I'll pour in the whole bottle. Given I will need to start the car and run through the gears, I'm reinstalling the plug and also the airbox.
Okay, so now the first fluid change is done. I'm gonna now start the car and just run through the gears, and then we can flush the fluid once again and then do a final fill.
As far as I understood, the procedure here is to run through all the gears and keep them engaged for at least 10 seconds. So I'm moving the gear shifter to reverse, neutral and drive, and then back again. The new fluid is mixing with the old fluid in the torque converter, and at this point we should be able to release it from the gearbox again. The fluid looks really nice and clean. It is obvious that this car had its gearbox serviced in the past properly.
I actually decided I'm going to take the car for a spin because the fluid was pretty red. I don't know if it's mixed properly, so let's try and do that. Let's see if this made any change.
Even after driving, the fluid seemed really nice and clean even after first fill. Now we will be doing the final fill so we can torque the 70mm hex plug to 35 Nm. The Torx 40 needs to be torqued to 8 Nm. Removing the airbox again is becoming a routine at this point, and I yet again fill in a full 4 liters of new fluid. Now for the final time we can reinstall the fill plug and torque it to 35 Newton meters.
Okay, now that the transmission is again filled up, we should use the little screw to set the level properly. But now the transmission needs to be at somewhat operating temperature. They say it should be around 50 to 60 degrees to set at the correct height. Now you should be using diagnostic equipment to see what's the temperature of transmission. I don't have a diagnostic equipment for Volvo, so I'm just going to let the engine run, let it warm up, and I'll use the thermometer on the gearbox to see how it's warming up.
This is not precise by any means, but it should be sufficient for this. Just bear in mind that the fluid inside is always a bit warmer than the casing. Now when the water is almost at operating temperature, I'm checking again the oil pan and gearbox with thermometer. Once we are around 50 degrees, I'm releasing the Torx 40 level plug and letting the excess fluid come out. It is really nice and clean at this point, and I felt that quite a lot of fluid came out, so I closed the plug a bit early.
Guys, I made a mistake here. When you're setting the level on the transmission fluid, make sure your engine is running. I didn't know that, so I poured out too much oil, so I had to buy additional 1 liter, which I will now have to fill in again, and I will now set the level once again with the running engine. So make sure, if you will be doing this, make sure your engine is running when you're setting the transmission oil level. So let's see if we can remove this oil filter with this 36mm socket. I'm going to try it with a torque wrench just to see on how torqued it really is and to be able to show you guys. Now it's set to 50 Newton meters. Nope. 50 is clicking. It is supposed to be set to 25 Newton meters. Let's go all the way to 75. Still nothing. Let's try it now all the way to 100 Newton meters. This is just crazy amount of force. I'm afraid I'm going to break that plastic. Oh, it starts to move now. Okay, so this is released now. Thankfully it didn't crack. I was kind of afraid it's going to break because it was so tight. And to be honest, this was at the Volvo specialist before, and I'm quite surprised that they would tighten this much. I mean, they should know better. These plastic housings are not supposed to be tight that much. They can really easily break. And you know, there is a rubber gasket. There is no real reason to tighten them this much.
The oil plug is a 70mm and removing it went thankfully without any issues. But I didn't realize how far the oil will shoot, so I made quite a mess.
Here's the mess.
Thankfully, tile floor is in my view the easiest to clean for any spills. Just try and do this with those fancy plastic garage floorings. I'm installing a copper washer and tightening this snug with my wrench. I confess I forgot to use my torque wrench here, but if you want, the torque should be 35 Newton meters. Bottom of the engine was a bit oily, so I clean up everything with a brake cleaner. Then I can remove the filter and replace it. The O-ring has a small part on it you can use to pull it out with pliers. Then just replace it with new one from the filter set. Finally, I'm torquing this down to 25 Newton meters. As for the oil, I'm using 5.2 liters of the Shell 0W30. My car was not showing the oil service interval yet, but I tried to reset it anyway. The process is to turn on the start button shortly, and then again push the read button on the stalk and start button simultaneously until the little eye icon will start flashing on the dashboard. The indicator should be then reset.
Well, the filter housing is apparently cracked now, it's leaking oil. I guess I was speaking way too soon that it didn't crack. Well, anyway, I hope you will have more luck with your repairs. But if you found this interesting, leave a like. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.